me. Cassandra Campbell is a narrator, an actress, a director. We learned all these wonderful things about her last night. She's a teacher, she's a mom, and she really is a fabulous narrator. She narrated the books, it's called the Hardpan Trilogy, The Higher Power of Lucky, won a Newbery Award. And there was a great deal of controversy about that book because it talks about a body part on a dog. I won't say it out loud because
it might cause controversy.
It might cause controversy. I mean, to me, it was actually kind of silly because dogs do have these parts of their bodies. And anyway, I thought it was a great story. I think it's an even better story than Loud. I must say that. I read it because it was a Newbery winner, but listening to it is just amazing. Cassandra really ups the ante for this one. And so many thanks to the Listening Library for allowing Cassandra to come here today. And I hope that you all enjoy listening to her as much as we enjoyed listening to her at dinner last night. You're on.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Okay. Well, I'm thrilled to be here. And thank you so much, Sharon and Liz, for making this happen. It's just such a privilege for me. Can you all hear me? I have a really strong voice, so I'll use this more when I read.
But it's for the recording as well.
Oh, okay. It's so nice for me to be here because I spend so much time in the studio, so I don't often get to speak to the people who are actually listening to the books that I record. So thank you all for coming out today. I am going to talk a little bit about how I got into the audiobook business first. I am an actress, and I was teaching acting at Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. And I was doing commercial voiceovers, actually more foreign language voiceovers. I speak fluent Italian and some French, so I had an agent where I would, occasionally do commercial voiceovers. I did for 3 years all of the voicing for Calvin Klein Italy. They wanted someone with, who could speak Italian with a slight American accent. It's sort of bizarre, but anyway. So a good friend of mine, who some of you may have heard reading audiobooks, Paul Bamer, who has read the Sharon Collins, the Suzanne Collins books, the Gregor the Overlander. I don't know if anyone's heard those. Anyway, he was doing audiobooks, and so he got me an audition, and I went in. And I decided for my audition that I would read a piece of nonfiction, because I love nonfiction, and because I agree wholeheartedly with what Susan said, that nonfiction is a story. It's somebody's story, and so I wanted to read something that was, I thought, beautifully written, which was the John Adams biography by David McCullough, that reads like fiction, because he's a great storyteller. So I went in and I read that, and then 4 months went by, and I didn't get a job narrating audiobooks, although I had felt when I went in there that this was something that I could spend the rest of my life doing, and I just absolutely felt at home, having always loved being in libraries and reading books. So then I finally did get called in, and the first book that I recorded was R.L. Stein's first adult fiction. It's called The Sitter, and it's about a murder that happens on the beach in Long Island. And I learned a tremendous amount recording that first book, because there are many technical things that you have to attend to when you're narrating an audiobook. You can't get too close to the microphone or your voice doesn't sound right. And you can't get too far away and nobody can hear you. You can't move your hair, and you can't, in the middle of a sentence, turn the page, or it goes. And so I learned a lot, but I fell in love with the process. Just to get to tell stories out loud. I have been an avid reader all my life. I'm one of 7 children, and I used to get off the school bus and go to the library and get books, and then I would make my sister and my brother, younger siblings, sit beside me and I would read to them. And sometimes they wouldn't want to listen to me, but I was older and I got my way. So I read books. I've always been, had such a love of reading. And then combined with my acting career, I just felt that I had landed in the right place when I started doing audiobooks. And I particularly was thrilled to get to read the Higher Power of Lucky books, because when I first opened these books, my grandmother was a dear, dear friend of Eleanor Estes, who is a Newbery winner. And so I grew up reading all of Estes' books, and Susan Patron's writing to me has a kind of similar prose style. And so I thought, it reminded me of that time in my childhood when I was reading. My grandmother had all of them on a low bookshelf, and I would have to be very careful because they were first editions. I would open those pages. And I read all of those books. Anyway, I digress. So I want to talk a little bit about what these wonderful ladies have been talking about reading aloud and what that does, I think, to increase our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of history, our understanding of different cultures. I love to read aloud, and I do it pretty much 5 days a week. I narrate all the time because I never know where I'm going to be going, and I think that, and I have to discover new words all the time. I read a lot of books that have foreign languages, that I have to practice different dialects in order to inhabit those characters. And so you never know where that journey is going to take you, and it expands your mind every time you read a book. And I read something recently about how through reading we increase our vocabulary something like 500 times. And so those words, I think when you read aloud or you listen to a book, the language gets embedded in your brain. So even if you don't know the exact meaning of a word, it's planted in your brain in a way that when you come up to it again, you have a context for understanding it. And that to me is so powerful. I watch that in my own children, how they struggle over a word and then they absorb it, and that listening helps them to absorb that. So I'm such a huge fan and supporter of that. And because I've learned foreign languages, I know that process intimately. I lived in Europe when I was a student, and I learned to speak fluent Italian on my feet there, through that immersion process. And you can feel those words first kind of stirring around in your head, and you can't get them out of your mouth. And then one day they just start coming out of your mouth, and it's this sort of startling, 2 steps back again, because suddenly you're saying it, and then you go, oh, you said it, it came out, and it feels, I don't know if anyone has had that experience, but it's an amazing kind of subconscious thing that happens in the brain. So what do I do when I prepare an audiobook? The first thing I do is I sit down and I read the book. And it sounds kind of strange, but the very first thing I do is I listen. I read, and while I'm reading, I'm listening. I'm listening for the author's voice. What does that particular author, what is their tone? What is their style? How do they use their prose? How do they weave their prose? Do they use a lot of parenthetical phrasing? How does the story arc itself? Who are the characters? I begin to make notes about who the characters are. I write down, bless you. I write down clues that the author gives you about who the characters are. Sometimes I'll say has a raspy voice, or a deep voice, or high melodic voice. So I write down all the clues for the characters because I want to give them that full voicing. I want to make them real people. My goal is always to make the characters in a book real, based on who we are, because we share, it's always a shared experience. So I make a lot of notes, but mostly I listen and try to hear, the music of a book, because every writer has their own music. And, the tempos change, and the cadences change, and the rhythms change. And so I know that sounds a little strange because I'm not listening, but I'm hearing it in my head. And I want that to be the primary thing, because ultimately what I want to do as a narrator is get out of the way of the story and just allow the story to pass through me. So that it's not, the performance is never about me, it's about the people in the book, making the people in the book, letting them come to life. And so I prepare all this stuff, and if the writing's really, really good, if that narrative pull is really, really strong, I don't have to do a lot. When you're reading a really good book, there's much less effort that goes into it, because the author has done it all for you. He or she has laid it out on the page, and it's very easy, and there's a real flow. But not every book is written that beautifully. So sometimes my effort has to be a little bit more, and that's where my training as an actress comes in, and I do what we call in acting terms a substitution exercise, where I do a lot of Reese Witherspoon, because she's a very distinct actress, and I can do her voice and make my characters have that perky little character that she does in Election, or she can be that Southern, kind of determined, it's going to go like this. And so I keep her, if I need to, I can keep her in my head, and she becomes like the archetype for the character that I'm going to create. Use a lot of Tommy Lee Jones also. And so that's a really helpful technique, to get you into the world of the character if the author hasn't given you so much description. With Susan Patrone's writing, none of that was necessary, because the characters were so vivid on the page that all I had to do was get out of their way. And I had a wonderful conversation with Susan about that, because so you do all this preparation before you go into the studio, right? You make all your notes and you read the book, and I usually don't read it out loud until I get into the studio, because I want there to be that sense of discovery. So you get into the studio, right, and you go in, and generally there's a room where you as the narrator are, and the walls are all padded to absorb the sound. Yes, we go into a padded room to do our work. And you sit down, and there's a music stand in front of you and a microphone, and you put your pages on the music stand, and then there's a small table where you have plenty of beverages, because you need to stay hydrated when you're narrating. And then there's a little speaker, so that the person who's on the other side of the glass, there's a big window, and then in the outer room, the director and the engineers sit, and they follow along with you, and so you collaborate with them. So you go into that room, and you have to begin. And I read this great thing recently that Glenda Jackson, this British actress, wrote all these notes about what to do to herself, about what to do in rehearsal. And there was one in the middle of the page that said, start doing the work. And that's the hardest moment. That's the scariest moment always, anytime I start recording a book, because, it's a long journey. You have to go through the whole story. And Dan Musselman, who's the executive producer at Random House, always says, begin with the first sentence, and keep going one sentence at a time until you get to the end. And that's a great little fun anecdote, but it doesn't, you have to begin. And beginning is, starting anything, homework, a project, Just to sit down and get going is the hard thing. Then once you do, it's fun, and you have that sense of discovery. But when I was working with Susan Petrone on this book, I asked her, there was one character, Short Sammy, I don't know how many of you read the book, and I said, how did you come up with that character? Is he based on a real person? And she said, sometimes when you're writing, a character just shows up. And you have to just let them show up, and you have to follow them. And it's kind of scary because you hadn't planned on them being there, but sometimes they end up being like one of the best characters in the book. And that's something, when she said that, I went, oh, because sometimes when you're narrating, you have an idea before you start of who a character is going to be, and the character doesn't turn out to be that at all. Because a character or a voice or something comes through you that you didn't expect, that you didn't plan for. And that is really the great fun of doing this, is letting the book guide you. There's a kind of a marriage between me shaping and arcing the story in a technical way, and then me just letting the characters do what they're going to do, go where they're going to go, and develop as they have their own full life. And afterwards, when you come out of the studio, you're sort of like, wow, what was that? The time has gone by, and you've been completely absorbed in that story, and you haven't realized that an hour has passed. Just like when you sit down and read a really good book, the dinner maybe gets cooked a little bit later, and the dishes stay in the sink longer because you get swept up in the story. I mean, that's why we read, right? So, yeah. Oh, and breathing. You have to talk about breathing. Because acting is, good deep breath there. Acting is and storytelling is taking a risk, right? Anytime you stand up and pretend that you're somebody else, it's risky, right? Anytime you dive into the story. But reading an audiobook, and I've narrated a lot of audiobooks, and I've also directed a whole bunch of them, even some that are over on that table. And you have to breathe into the story. A lot of times when narrators don't have much experience in the studio, they come in and the breath does that. And so you really have to find ways, and this is something that actors work on all the time, to relax into the storytelling so that you're breathing with the author's intentions. It probably sounds kind of misty, woo-woo kind of. But that's what you have to do. You have to breathe life into the story, and then the story will meet you. And it's just a wonderful, amazing experience. So I'm going to read to you a little bit now from The Higher Power of Lucky, which was Susan's first of the Hard Hand trilogy. And Susan and I have become dear friends. She came to all of the recording sessions in Los Angeles for this book, and she was always there and offered notes and suggestions, and then we would all have lunch together. And I think she's such a wonderful writer and really intuitive about how to tell the story out loud, too. She gave some wonderful notes. But I just want to say one more thing about authors reading their own books. I directed Sarah Czar, who wrote, I don't know. She's really good. She has some background as an actress. She wrote Story of a Girl and Sweethearts. And she was wonderful in the studio because she could reach inside that acting training that she had and bring that to bear in the recording. But Susan, who's very shy, was just in awe of the idea that I could make her story sound the way she had written it and get what she intended. And I always am so curious about that because the voice of the writer is so strong. But it's just, I guess, a different skill set, Because she just was like, oh, how did you know? who that character was. Because you wrote it. How did you not know? Anyway, okay. I have to put my glasses on for this part. So, this is Chapter 8, Snake. Too late to hide the specimens. Lucky scooped them into their boxes, which you have to be very careful about or their legs or wings break off. But Brigitte had already seen. Instead of acting mad and making Lucky scrub the entire table with Ajax, not just the little place where the specimens had actually touched it, Brigitte went to the sink and leaned on it, gazing out the window. "Oh, Lucky," she said. "Bugs again on the table." Lucky noticed that the envelope in Brigitte's hand was from her own father. She had recognized his handwriting. Every month he sent a check, but never a letter, even though every month Lucky still thought he might. She said, "Did my father send a letter to me?" Brigitte sighed. She kept on staring out the window. "No, only the little check that is never enough." She looked like a beautiful daytime TV lady doctor in her pale green hospital scrubs from the Sierra City thrift store. "I have $12.56 saved from my job at the Found Object Wind Chime Museum," Lucky offered. "We can add that to the money he sent." Brigitte answered by lifting a shoulder and poofing air, her way of saying, "Forget it." The phone rang just as Lucky realized she hadn't put the wet clothes in the dryer. It was Lincoln. "Hold on," Lucky told him, then to Brigitte. "I forgot about the laundry. I'll do it in a sec." "No," said Brigitte in a faraway voice, a voice that was thinking of other things. She slid a cassette into the tape player, the one with the French songs that Brigitte knew every word of by heart. "It does not matter," she said. "I do it." "What's up?" Lucky said into the phone. "Nothing. Why?" Lincoln was not a good conversationalist. "Lincoln, you called me." "Oh, right. It's Commodities Day." "I know. We already got ours. There's some weird orange cheese this time." Lucky could hear Lincoln adjusting the phone. She knew he was tying a knot. Lincoln said, "Want to meet up at Short Sammy's in a while?" Lucky and Lincoln liked to see how Sammy cooked the free government food. He had a very unique way of cooking, and he liked having company. "Okay. First I have to scrub the table because of the scorpion flies and tarantula hawk wasp that She broke off just as Brigitte screamed and slammed the dryer door shut. "Hang on, Lincoln," Lucky said and dropped the phone. In a second, Brigitte flew by, grabbing Lucky's hand. She ran outside, pulling Lucky after her. HMS Beagle followed excitedly. "What happened?" Lucky asked. Brigitte's eyes were huge and her face was red. She seemed to be sending off waves of heat in the bright sunlight. "What happened?" Brigitte said breathlessly. "Is it a snake?" She said the word snake like most people would say rotting, dead, pus-filled rat. "A snake is in the dryer!" Brigitte pointed dramatically toward the laundry area at the end of the kitchen trailer. In a very calm and relaxed way, to show Brigitte that snakes were actually clean and not repulsive, Lucky said, "I see. A snake's in the dryer." She said it like snakes in dryers were not a very big deal. She leaned casually against the aluminum side of the trailer. "What kind of snake?" Brigitte pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. "A giant snake," she said. Brigitte didn't even like to see pictures of snakes, which was really, really silly as far as Lucky was concerned, because a picture couldn't hurt anyone. But Lucky knew that to Brigitte, an actual snake in the dryer was a quadruple gazillion times worse than a picture. Lucky ran back inside, with Brigitte behind her. "Do not open the door of the dryer," Brigitte shouted. "She's in there!" "Who?" "The viper. I think she snuck inside the dryer and climbed up into the dryer." Brigitte's hand and arm showed a snake slithering toward the dryer. "We have to seal it so she cannot escape. Quick, get that sticky grating." "Well, what kind of snake is it?" Lucky asked again. "I am sure she's a viper, a rattlesnake. Imagine to live in a place where just by doing the laundry you can be killed." Privately, Lucky admired snakes because they were very, very highly adapted to their habitat. One amazing true fact she had read was that snakes actually started out as creatures with legs, but evolved to not having legs because they could move around better without them. In fact, Lucky figured the average person went around thinking, "Those poor snakes sure have been waiting a long time to evolve some legs." She would never have guessed not having legs would be better than having them. But she doubted that Brigitte knew enough about snakes to tell whether it was a rattlesnake or some harmless kind. Lucky said, "Brigitte, what does it look like? What color?" Brigitte shrugged and looked insulted, as if the question had a completely obvious answer. She said, "She is the color of a snake." Lucky sighed. "What shape is its head?" A lot of times, when Brigitte didn't know the answer to something, either she acted like it was a dumb question, or she pretended to know the answer, or else she veered around with an answer that wasn't really an answer at all. "Lucky, we will look at the shape of her head after she has died, when it is safe." "You mean when it dies of old age?" Lucky couldn't believe how weird that plan was. "That could probably take years. We'll have to hang up the wet laundry outside, and the towels won't have California softness." That's not really true. The towels in California don't have that air-dried softness. "Lucky," said Brigitte, crossing her arms in front of her chest. "Please go get that gray sticky tape right now." "Wait. Yikes, I left Lincoln on the phone. Be right back." Lucky picked up the phone. "There's a snake in the dryer," she said. "Miles's grandmother had one in her dryer once. It came in through the vent going to the outside of the mobile home." "What did she do?" 30 minutes on normal cycle." "You're kidding." There was a little silence on Lincoln's end. "No," he said. "That's what she did. Her dryer doesn't have a see-through door. Does yours?" "No, it's just pure metal." "So what?" "She couldn't be sure it wasn't a rattler, so she killed it." Brigitte wants to duct tape the dryer door shut and wait till the snake dies of old age. After that, she'll probably want to duct tape the whole entire outside of the trailers. Lincoln said, "We could catch a mouse and use it as bait to lure the snake out." All of Lincoln's plans were both simple and complicated. They were tempting, but at the same time, they made you feel doubtful before you even got started. But Lucky now had her own idea. "I'll meet you at Short Sammy's in about half an hour," she said, and hung up. She went back to the laundry area with the duct tape and a pair of scissors and gave them to Brigitte. Brigitte stuck the end of the duct tape on one end of the dryer, pressing it hard, peeling off more tape and pressing it against the metal, until she had the door very securely fixed. No creature inside the dryer could get out through that door. Lucky climbed up on top of the dryer, where she could peer out a tiny window. "What are you doing, Lucky?" Brigitte asked. She was wearing a "don't you dare touch the duct tape on the dryer door" look. "Wait a sec," said Lucky. Still peering out the window, she stomped the heel of her shoe on the dryer. She braced herself against the wall and banged her shoe on the front and the sides of the dryer. Brigitte watched. But one of the good things about her was that she didn't act like she was the total boss of everything. especially when it came to the ways things worked in Hardpan versus the ways things worked in France. Brigitte was willing to listen to what Lucky had to say. Pretty soon, through the dusty window, Lucky could see the snake gliding away from the trailer. "It's gone," she said. She jumped down and dashed outside in time to see its long, thin, reddish, legless, rattleless body disappear in a dry wash. It was a beauty, about 5 feet long, thin as a hose. Lucky thought it was a red racer, the kind of snake that eats rats and even fights rattlesnakes. Lucky felt very wonderful about her heroic deed of figuring out how to chase the snake away without killing it in a gruesome way or waiting for it to die of old age. Plus, if it had been a rattlesnake, nobody got bitten. She went inside thinking she had to figure out some kind of screen to put on the vent to keep the snake from coming back. At that moment, Lucky knew she was a highly evolved human being. But Brigitte was at the bathroom cupboard, rummaging through the aspirin and Q-tips and hair conditioner. "No, I cannot find the fingernail polish remover. It is the only way to get rid of that sticky mess of duct tape," she said. "It is wrong to have snakes in dryers. This is not something that would ever happen in France. California is not a civilized country." Lucky didn't say a word. It was too hopeless and disappointing. Brigitte hated bugs and she hated snakes, and she thought California was a country. Plus, the checks from her father were too small. The sad and beautiful French songs played on and on, the sound drifting out the window and into the dry desert air. Lucky didn't know what the words meant, but she understood that Hardpan was pushing Brigitte away, and France was calling her home. Cute, right? Yeah. So you can see that we do make mistakes when we narrate, right? So that if you make a mistake, you just go right back to the top of the sentence and start the sentence again, hopefully without going, "I made a mistake," and breathing on top of it. So thank you all so much. It's such a privilege for me to be here.
Thank you.
We'll have time for questions at the end, so if you want to ask Cassandra some questions before she leaves, we can do that. Okay, I hope you all know that Overdrive is available in all Wisconsin public libraries through the Wisconsin Public Library Consortium. Check your library's homepage. This library's homepage has Overdrive in the left-hand column towards the bottom of the front page. And you can download ebooks or audiobooks. Staff can help you if you don't know how. Isaiah can help you if you don't know how. He's the one who told me. And we have, as a special guest today, Nick Glass from Teaching Books, and he's going to show us how to do a little bit more of those instructional extensions, how to find information easily. Also available through all Wisconsin public and school libraries from BadgerLink. And then, as soon as Nick is done, we're going to hear from all of you. Come this way.
Good morning. You all need to stretch. Feel free to stand up, walk around. Just get the computer set. How do I get out of the PowerPoint and get to it? I'm a Mac person also. It's a cult, isn't it? thank you all for coming out this morning to the library, and Sharon and Liz and Cassandra and everybody for participating in this. It's a great pleasure to share with you some connections to books that might be very useful. How many of you are currently reading a book right now? Excellent. I didn't mean this second, although it could have been. How many of you have been reading throughout? Yes. Fantastic. What are you reading? If you're willing to share. The adult biography, the one that Liz mentioned, or Cassandra mentioned. Wonderful. I did actually just finish the Steve Jobs biography. Yeah. The adult one. There's one for kids too. But what this is here is this is a database that I began called Teaching Books. And how many of you have ever seen an author speak before? You ever seen an author? Did you like that? Was it a good thing for you? Your eyes got really big. What did it change? You thought of the book differently? I mean, that's what I was trying to do. I used to work at a bookstore called Pooh Corner in Madison, if anybody remembers that, on Monroe Street. I was the Pooh Boy. There were two of us, 2 men and 20 women. And I brought authors to the schools and libraries and to the store, and people love to see that. So I thought I'd bring an author here and show you what I'm talking about. I'll give you a choice. You can have, to see how this book was illustrated, Denise Fleming does pole painting, if you'd like to see that. And you can watch all these at home later. You can see Kevin Hankis, how he created Kitten's First Full Moon. He lives in Madison. Or you can see how Melanie Watt creates a book with computers called Scaredy Squirrel. So those that want, those that want Scaredy, raise your hand. Those that want Denise, raise your hand. This is winning. And those that want Kevin, raise your hand. I think that Denise won. Okay. So what you do on Teaching Books is whenever you're reading a book, what I'm trying to do with Teaching Books is give you materials that will change the way you relate to that book. So Sharon wanted, for example, a second ago, she wished to have an audio excerpt of Ghetto Cowboy, if I'm not mistaken. She said, I don't have it. Well, what you can do, you keep glasses off to be able to see. So you type in the title that you're after. Wasn't that the name of the book?
Capital with a W.
Thank you. So you look up whatever book you're reading. And it has to be a book for children or teens. The John Adams book you're reading right now is not one. So it wouldn't have met that criteria. But then you're going to have all the different kinds of materials. And you look on the right under the contents there. You'll see there's, how do you say the author's name? There's a video book trailer. There's the audio excerpt of the book. There's a lesson plan. So for any book you're reading, I want to add a dimension that you can't have without technology, such as all the video book trailers or the audio or all of these things. So Sharon asked for an audio excerpt of this, so here it is, and it would sound like this. Maybe.
Candlewick on Brilliance Audio presents Ghetto Cowboy by G. Neary, performed by J.D. Jackson. The front door is open. I walk in and the first thing I smell is Hort.
We'll let you figure out what that was. So the idea is that all the materials for what you're reading can be in one place. So if you were looking at, this is where I wanted my notes, some of the things that were just mentioned. So for every title that was mentioned just now, there are different kinds of materials. If you wanted to see Denise Fleming talk about Alphabet Under Construction, you can look up a title, or you can look up an author. So let's just take Denise Fleming, although I can look up that title, certainly. I'm just showing you different ways to use this. So you look up whatever you're reading on this database, and you will then have connections that you would not have without the possibilities. And the wonderful thing about Wisconsin is that our state has provided this resource for every school librarian resident equally. My dream and my background is in ed policy. I was writing my dissertation when I worked at Pooh Corner in educational policy, and I wanted everybody to meet the author, and not just the people that could afford to have them come to their school, or the library that had the staff like Sharon might have to bring somebody in. So I fly out to these people's homes, and I film them for you to be able to see them. So I'll play the first minute of this movie. I call them Meet the Author programs. And I'll just let you see how she does this work. For just a minute, I'll play it, the 4-minute movie. And soon there will be captions, by the way.
My books are created by pulp painting, which is the paper making technique.
This is my palette.
I have cotton rag fiber floating in water. I pour those onto a screen. The water drains through, the cotton fiber stays on top of the screen. And to get the different images, I either draw with the fiber in a squeeze bottle, or I cut stencils and fill in the stencil shape with a different colored fiber. So it's actually building layer on top of layer of fiber.
So can you think of the book the same way? Maybe. But what we have here is a second movie that's about 6 minutes long, where she just does one entire illustration. So those of you that want to understand how an illustrator or a professional writer does their work, look them up. You can see all of the movies that we've made by going to the home page, and you can click home or the logo to go home. And you'll see two things. One, here it says Meet the Author Movies. Those are all of them right there. Or you can drop author book resources down to Meet the Author Movies. And then you can, there are many more points of access, but I'm just trying to show you two ones that you might remember. And then what you have are these, so if you're reading Click, Clack, Moo, or you're reading Jack Yantos, I went to his home and show you how he does his work and how you see his journals. The most recent one I just filmed was Lemony Snicket. And that was really tricky because Lemony is not really, it's not really his name. And so you're not really allowed to see him, but so how do you film him? So I'll just show you the beginning of that, because it's kind of silly. And I think silly is always good.
My name is Lemony Snicket. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to appear on camera to warn people away from their books. I'm the author of a great number of books, and I recommend none of them.
So then he goes through, and you really get to understand why he has books and why he got into this writing. You see him typing and working, but it's very tricky to film somebody who doesn't want to be on camera and hates his own books. But these are some of the most amazing authors that you might really like to know. If you're studying, how many teachers, how many of you are in elementary school? Middle school? Secondary? Excellent, you're a teacher too. And so what you have here, so Juji Morales showing how she does Mexican folktales, or Patricia Polacco, or you're studying reading The Giver. Maybe a lot of you have read that in your schools. Here's the author talking about how she writes the setting. Or The Last of the Crow Indian Chiefs, Joe Medicine Crow, just won the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the president a few years ago. And then How to Make a Pop-Up Book. All of these are available to you to have the moment you're reading the book. But I can't film everybody, so I began this concept of calling authors, and every day we call an author, and we say, why did you write this book? And we call these Meet the Author book readings, or here, Meet the Author book readings. Or you can do a search for example, Dead-Ended Norvell. I'll just use that as an example. You've got to put your fingers in the right spot to start typing. So, when Jack Yantos wrote this book, and we've done this with, like I said, every day pretty much we do these. So we call the author, sure, there's the film with him in his home, but I did the film before this book came out. So then we call him up. And this is another way to use audio. You can have audio with a wonderful performance. Cassandra is on here in a number of her books performing the book, a little excerpt of the book. It's not the full book, by the way, just audio excerpts. I want you just to use your ear to get into the book and change the way you relate to it based on the expertise of these narrators. That's my dream with that. But what I also think is really important is understanding the author's purpose, how they go about their research, how do they do their writing, what were they thinking? And maybe that little bit can help. And so by asking these people these questions, it helps.
My name is Jack Yantos, and I'm the author of Dead-Ended Norvell. I'm going to tell you a bit about how I came to write this book, and then I'll read a nutty little excerpt to you. This story is about my life, and full of facts and fiction too. I was lucky enough to come from a poor town, rich in history, a Depression-era town started by Eleanor Roosevelt.
And he goes into the background of it. And one of the neat things with these Meet the Author book readings is with illustrators, we also get we take an image from the book so you can see how we're doing that. Right now, have you guys ever heard of the Caldecott Medal? Have you kids heard of that? It's for the very best illustrated books of the year. And it's just the most distinguished picture book that the American Library Association gives out to only in America. It's only for America. And so we're going, right now it's 75 years old. And I'm on a committee that we're celebrating that. So I'm calling every living Caldecott recipient and asking them how they illustrated the books that won that award. These are some of the recent ones we just did. So here's a brand new book by Rebecca Stead that won the Newbery. But for the Caldecott, where's a good example? I know we just passed some, but there are plenty. Or we can just be silly and have Captain Underpants here, talking about how he did that. So these are just some of the ones that you can search in so many different ways. This is a digital library. You can walk in the door, you can go left, you can go right, you can go to a chair and take a nap, you can look on the computer. There's so many wonderful things you can do in this very building. I'm trying to create the same sort of options here. You can search by author, illustrator. Sharon's very excited about penguin lessons that are being taught in the schools here. Great. So whatever you're studying, you can also look it up if you can type. And then you're going to get all of the materials we have. These are not just titles about penguins. These are titles that have instructional materials associated with them. So this is not a database to tell you just what's a good book, but here's materials to have a discussion to take it to another level. So let's say you were in 1st to 5th grade and you wanted nonfiction. So I can just keep narrowing this down based on the different criteria on the side here. So this is nonfiction, grades 1 to 5, Penguin. And so here's 9 different titles with different kinds of materials ready for you to start using and enjoying them. So you can just click on one and then you'd be right at, I'm not quite sure what I'm clicking on, but we'll see. Oh, I like this book. So this is a really fun. Judy Sierra did a lot of great stories. Mark Brown and her done a number of books and so forth. And here you have different kinds of materials. So a video book reading of it, and a lesson plan, and an interview with the author, and so forth. So one other weird collection that we have that I wanted to highlight quickly, and then I'm going to tie into Common Core. So I want to make sure you're prepared for that as well. But I've decided that I'm trying to create authentic relationship between you, the reader, and that's it with the text. So there's a human being that wrote every book. I'm already having them explain why they wrote it. Why don't I also clarify one very simple thing? How do you say their name? I met this woman today. Cassandra? No. Cassandra, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah. That's her choice. I should respect that, learn that, and know that. So this is now about 2,000 authors telling you the stories of their name. And it's kind of ridiculous. Some are very short, some are very long. And the example I thought I'd play right now for you is under R. And let me do it this way so I can see. Do you guys know this book? Yeah. Who wrote it?
Rick Riordan.
Rick Riordan? Any other ideas? Riordan? 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 Okay, you ready? It's only, and it tells you how long it is. It's only 3 seconds. So you ready?
Hi, my name is Rick Riordan. Long time, like in rye bread.
Riordan. Okay? But is it Hankies?
Listen to the audio.
Is it Hankies? But audiobooks are wrong. As a matter of fact, I have I've worked with two producers of audiobooks that called me and said, could you please call this author so I know how to say their name for the audiobook? Because it's been mispronounced a lot of times. If you ever listen to the Harry Potter audiobooks, the first one says Hermione, right? Instead of Hermione. And so is that correct, audiobook experts?
No, it says Hermione.
It does? You sure?
Yeah.
Then the original one did?
Yeah.
Because they had that wrong originally. Okay. So I don't know where it was changed, but I remember hearing it at one point that way. But you're the expert. I bow to you.
I've listened to it so many times.
Absolutely. So the other thing I want to point out is Common Core. And this is also on the home page. It's also, I decided to make that popular. That's our most popular thing. Let me tell you a little bit about what Common Core is about for those of you that might not be an ed policy crazy person like me, or Sharon, who's also read it. Right now, I think it's pretty fair to say that our schools are not equally producing students who are ready for careers or college. And our government in the United States is upset about that, understandably. So they needed to find a way to work on that. And a lot of the money in education goes to what's called assessment. How are our schools doing? How can we help them do better? So that each child, all of our children, I consider you children, my children too. I know we've never met. But my point is that we're all in this together. So 46 states came together, the superintendents of education met, and they said, let's build an assessment system that's going to be the same instead of us spending millions upon millions of dollars in each state doing it themselves. And they said, you each get 15% wiggle room. You can do 15% on your own, because we're all slightly different in our states, but that's how that's going to work. So they built Common Core, and there are a number of things that in literacy, you saw these wonderful quotes from the Common Core standards that Sharon and Liz put on there for every of those audiobook excerpts they played. And those are great examples of what they're thinking. But I want to talk to you about some of the broader things that teaching books might be able to help with. So I just want you to be able to read these things here. So the 3 things that I think about a lot are 4 things. And right now this only says 3, but next week we'll say 4. Because I wrote this a year ago, and I'm just redoing it now. But one is a balance of literary and non-literary information. Any of you in, let's say, 4th or 5th grade? Any kids? No? 6th grade? 5th grade? 4th grade. Do you have a textbook? Do you have like a history textbook or something? Do you have a big book? Oh, okay. No worries.
Do living books.
Wonderful. But my point is that a lot of kids they see a textbook and never see anything like that before. There's captions, there's different formats, there's indexes, there's all kinds of other bits of information. And we want to make sure that kids are exposed to a variety. Common Core wants everyone to be exposed to a variety of materials, not reading the same types of formats, being exposed to different types of language and approaches to providing information through text. So the charge in this first one is balancing information and literary so you can get to that. And they say in elementary school they want 50% of each, information and literary, and in secondary and high school they want 70% information, 30% literary. And that's not necessarily, that's school-wide, that's not for one class. That's the entire curriculum. Second thing is to make sure that everybody's reading in all different disciplines. Is there really a place where a book doesn't belong in the curriculum? I mean, I found one for high school woodshop. That was the holdout for me. And I deeply believe that. Every PE class, every science class, every math class, every social studies, history, yes?
So, did you list that somewhere? Because I would like to know what that book is for woodshop.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
There's a fun one. But yes, I can dig it up again. And then the idea is we want everyone to read it across all disciplines. Then finally, we want you to think about how do you discuss a text? How do you think about a book? And you go back and just say, let's say you're reading Night by Elie Wiesel, which is a wonderful, incredible account of this author's experience in the Holocaust. It's earth-shattering, this very thin book describing his experiences. And while it's wonderful to read that and have a personal reflection, that's not going to help you be career or college ready to have that personal feeling. What school is trying to say, or what the Common Core people are trying to say, in my interpretation, is know how to build an argument. Know how to build an evidence-based argument, and whenever you can, go back to the text to state that. Sharon and Liz built an argument for Common Core by quoting it directly for you, instead of just saying, oh, it ties right in, or I wish it could tie in. They gave specific examples. So a lot of times when you're discussing books in your homeschool environment, why not encourage everybody to answer a specific question and have those questions go back to the text? Where did you learn that you have to go to the Empire State Building in the 106th floor, to get to Olympus? Instead of just saying, oh, it'd be cool just to go up to Olympus somehow, somewhere. So you have to have those facts embedded to it. So what Teaching Books has done is we've just looking at the grades and hearing who's here, I'll just grab 6 to 8 as my example. So what we have here are different types of lists and materials to help you both select titles that help with this, as well as give you ready-to-use instructional materials. So if you wanted to be really excited about the text exemplars, there's their Appendix B. You're welcome to go all out. But what you also can do is look at these other fantastic lists. These were actually put together by our organization, the State of Wisconsin, Department of Public Instruction, and the School of Education at the University of Wisconsin-Madison have an amazing thing called the Children's Cooperative Book Center. And if you ever want to venture to probably the best children's library in our region, head on up to Madison. But these are reading lists that these incredible librarians put together. So if you were interested in science books, here you have some great titles, different types of formats. One's a graphic. This is fast food choices for middle school. Or you might have heard of Fast Food Nation, but that one's a little too advanced for middle school, so this is a middle school version. Fantastic book on plague and the moon, and these are all different types of formats, different books, but with their ready-to-use materials. So I click on one of these, and I'm then going to have recordings with the author about their process, that there was an audiobook, we have the narration excerpt of that, we have the lesson plans, and so forth. So this is a database that's freely there for you to use, and it's directly tied to whatever initiative you're using. If you're using Common Core, great. If you're using awards, fantastic. If you just wanted to know, and I'll end with this, if you're interested in, Sharon and Liz have mentioned the Odyssey Award, which is a fantastic award by a few divisions of the American Library Association. Well, it doesn't matter, I don't care what you're reading. If you're interested in American Indians, or there's an award for that. There are people out there jurying the very best books for us who are experts, who really think it through. So if I go down here to O for Odyssey, these are all of the online resources for every book that's ever been recognized by the Odyssey. If I was interested in young adult, I'd look at the Prince. If I was interested in information, I'd look at the Cyber. You might not know those awards, but if you look through these, it will then teach you about what they all are doing and for. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that this is a library that's available to you in our state through DPI and BadgerLink. I have bookmarks to give all of you with your access. From any campus, any library will automatically go in. From home, you do need to sign in, and you can just use the password on Wisconsin. One word, case insensitive, but it's on the piece of paper for you. And there's a video there if you want help. You can click and send us any questions and comments and so forth. And yeah.
Can I ask a question? Are you?
Absolutely.
Okay, so besides being a homeschooling parent, I'm also one of the teachers for an online school.
Wonderful.
How do you deal with hooking up virtual schools to this?
If you're working in the state of Wisconsin, the state has already purchased that for you.
So we can connect that to our website virtually?
Absolutely. And you can just link to it, and that's all there. If you were to look under help and training, there's a whole area on sharing and promoting. And within that, there's ways for you to actually do the embedding. It says here embed a link to teaching books. And then I've even given you the code. I've written the code out for you and everything else. And a choice of logos. And the descriptive text. And whatever else we can dream up. We're right now serving 27,000 schools as a company of 6. It's all about giving you the tools to try to succeed and trying to help you know of it. But the idea behind this is that it's all the information for trade books, books that, how would I describe a trade book? That are in a bookstore, that you could buy in a normal bookstore and not just through an educational publisher. And so it's organized by, again, these are just other points of access. Whatever you're interested in. So you're right now doing homeschooling, maybe you're working on wanting to encourage horror for your 5th grade, or whatever. I'm just trying to be kid-centric here, right? I don't know. And so here you have all of those things, and so forth. So there's so much, and you can look at it in so many ways, and I can never help. My name is Nick, and you can just write me at nick@teachingbooks.net or call, my number's there. And I don't know if I brought cards or I brought bookmarks. If I had cards, I'll put them out there too. And did that do what you wanted?
Absolutely.
Does that answer
Thank you.
everybody's needs?
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.